All right, so three acknowledging the signal plan. If you have it and then you don't. Okay. Forgot about it. You can have that. If anybody doesn't have a sheet, Danny, I've never worked with you before, but I think that you'll see that I placed the PDF for you privately. I haven't seen you post it for the February year. You just post the PDF I sent to you privately to the group. That would be excellent. You think you can do that, or should I do that?
I'm on it. Sorry, just 1 second.
No,
Does everybody have a copy?
I can do it again. It's not a problem.
Okay, you guys have remember? Okay.
Right over here.
Okay. Okay, I sent to the wrong person. Yeah, that's okay. Let's learn together. So in some sense, the journey from tonight until the end of Rosh Hashanah and Kippur is it's an interesting journey. And I think that on some level, it's we've spoken about it already since we spoke about it this year in various forms, and I think that in the Hasidic master's class that we've been studying together for the last 4 weeks, it's been we looked at some of the rabbis talking about tshuva, and I spoke about it with you as like a journey of attunement, right? That the musical instrument, that atonement and attunement are not linguistically connected, but they sure as heck sound alike. And I think for many of us that's a more natural way of thinking about tshuva, and not specific things necessarily religiously or ethically or morally that we're necessarily bringing up, but we often think of being out of alignment, and that the musicality where there's a kind of there's a clear sense of what's harmonious and what isn't. You can readily imagine that instruments go out of tune, and that tshuva in that sense is a profoundly natural need, right? Instead of it being something lamentable, it's something inevitable. It's almost impossible to imagine an instrument being tuned forever. It just doesn't work like that. Conditions being what they are, and life being what it is, it's kind of, there's no way to safeguard an instrument so that it stays in tune all the time, a voice or a body or a society. And in that sense, tshuva is a deeply organic element. And there are parts of it that I think a lot of us are more comfortable with, and some other parts, not that any part of it is comfortable, because when you're out of tune, it's very dissonant. It feels very grating on the body and the heart and the ears. It's a tshuva, the listening practice, and the tshuva and the attunement practice is both healthy and also painful. There's a path of pain in tshuva that also kind of following the journey from tonight, which is framed as Selichot, which means forgiveness. It's funny because Selichot really should come at the end of the 10 days, because we really don't ask for forgiveness on Rosh Hashanah necessarily. Really, Rosh Hashanah is not a day of confession. Rosh Hashanah is not seen as a day of recognition of sin. It's a completely, in some ways, it's not natural to what Rosh Hashanah is in the Torah, and it's certainly not natural necessarily to the way that Rosh Hashanah is framed in Chazal, in the rabbis. But there's something in Rosh Hashanah itself, and that begins tonight, but also really hits its peak, really in Rosh Hashanah, that then leads towards Yom Kippur in a very beautiful way. And I want to look at that tonight with all of you, and then we'll do some exercises together. Every year we do a writing exercise, and we'll see we'll be doing a writing exercise tonight at around 10:15 or so. So let's learn together for half hour. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Source number one, if you open up your sources, is the source for determining the Torah. It appears in the book of Leviticus also, but it appeared enough. In the 7th month, on the first day of the month, Mikra Kodesh Yelachem V'Mlachet Avoda Lo Ta'ati Yom Teruah Yelachem. It's a day of gathering for the sake of the sacred gathering, an occasion of that is sanctified as Kodesh. You don't do work, meaning it's a day of inspection, reflection for the Torah. Those two things are anathema, right? It's interesting that why on a Mikra Kodesh can't you do Malachah? Something about Mikra Kodesh, something about that day requires something about doing that work would be detrimental to the expression of the holiness of the day. Come out. And it's a day of horn blowing, a horn blowing day. The trumpet day. It's it's like a Dizzy Gillespie day. We don't know what Shua means. Shua means was a blowing of some horn, some sound that was emitted through breath, some admixture of breath expelled from the body, contained in some vessel that would produce a sound, and that it was generally assumed to be a jubilant sound. Shua is used in most places in Tanakh. We talked about this in the Patrick Answers class. That word, as it's associated with a trumpet, is usually what kind of sound is a true sound? It's like the Hareotim, it's like it's happy. Many places in Psalms, also in the Tanakh, but in Psalm in particular, it's a very connected with Rina, like joyous, happy time. It's got a good beat. It's an upbeat, the major, not a minor. But for Chazal, the rabbis don't hear it exclusively that way. They do hear it that way as well, but they hear it with another valence. And we've done this before, and I'll show you the Gemara. If you look at the Talmud here, source number 2, the source that we studied together in the Patrick Answers class, and we did a little bit 2 weeks ago. The Mishnah in the 2nd century, right? Again, so the Bible, right? The rabbinic period from 100 before the Common Era to about 700 of the Common Era. The rabbis of the Mishnah period, the rabbinic period say, reading the Bible, which is much earlier, they say, oh, it says a trua, but what does that mean exactly? That's the rabbinic way of thinking. They're like, tell me exactly. I really need you to tell me God exactly what to do. Tell me what a trua is. So the Mishnah said a shiur trua is begimli yavavot. The length of a trua, because they were really concerned with making the sound that God wanted. The length of the trua could be very short. It could be medium. It could be, how long is it sound? It could be a very long sound. They said it's the length of 3 wails or whimpers. Then the Talmud goes into a very quick discussion of, well, wait a second. We thought that a trua is the length of 3 shivarim or broken sounds, not whimpering, but more longer cries, right? Presumably those are longer than whimpers. So the rabbis are like, wait a second, is it a whimper or is it a longer whimper? Is it like a But what's the broader assumption of the rabbis already in this? What's a trua? That usually we said a trua is like a jubilant, Dizzy Gillespie, Louis Armstrong. It's like a jazz riff. It's great. It's major. What are the rabbis already assuming? Right? The Mishnah already says that a trua is the length of a whimper. So, I mean, you could have a happy whimper. It's already, the assumption of the Talmud is already that the trua now has been converted from a happy, jubilant, celebratory coronation, major, expression of joy. There's something significantly more somber. The shofar in its essential, right, or the day, I would say, because the day is defined by this trua thing. It's a day of doing this thing. And what's the day? Is it a day of music on the inside with dancers and in the room garden, and it's like, or is it a day of crying? Which one? Is it both? The rabbis eventually, we don't have to go through the rest of the Talmudic piece here, but they draw on the whimpering of a mother. Obviously, the mother of Sisera, we talked about this before, the enemy of the Jewish people's mother, the general of the armies that came against the Jews. And his mother was crying, waiting for him to come home, and her whimpers become the significant analogy for what a shul is. Not only her whimpers, but look at this next midrash. We don't have it in the Hebrew, I should have brought it in, but it doesn't. Look at this next midrash. This is a rabbinic folk tale from, again, around the 8th to 9th centuries, called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, the chapters of Rabbi Eliezer. This I'm sure many of you have heard in the Midrashic folk stories. And Aviva Zornberg, you'll see in source 4 as she makes an appearance. The great Aviva Zornberg will also do incredible things with this midrash. Midrash, a rabbinic folk tale. When Abraham came from Mount Moriah, chapter 22 in the book of Genesis, where Abraham sacrifices, or almost sacrifices, his beloved son, Isaac. He comes back from Mount Moriah, that is a locust, that's the place where it took place. Satan, or Samael, was furious that he had failed to realize his lust to abort Abraham's sacrifice. In the rabbis who lived at this period, they're trying to imagine in their fantasy that the satanic world didn't want Abraham to succeed in sacrificing his son, because that would mean like that Abraham, like they didn't succeed. Abraham was successful in almost like he went through it, that God rewards him, and Samael or Satan is angry. The imagination of the rabbis, angry. He needed to get something, he had to get his kill, right? He didn't succeed in stopping Abraham, but he still had a chance. What did he do? That's literally what the Midrash said. What did he do? He went off and he told Sarah, Sarah, have you not heard what's been happening in the world? And she said, no. Said, your old husband, by the way, there are many different versions of this. In one of the Samael comes in the guise of Abraham, he actually dresses up as Abraham as if he were, right, like some kind of sci-fi movie, kind of transformed into Abraham. But in this model, he comes and he says, have you heard what's going on in the world? He says, no. And so he said, your old husband has taken the boy, Isaac, and sacrificed him as a burnt offering, while the boy cried and wailed in his helplessness, right? That he could not be saved. Immediately, Sarah begins to cry and wail. She cries 3 sobs, corresponding to the 3 tikiyot notes of the shofar. And she wailed 3 times, corresponding to the Gevavah, the Trua, the staccato notes of the shofar. And then she gave up the ghost and died. That's a horrible translation there. Her soul, her soul flew out of her, and she dies. Abraham came and found her dead, as it says, Vayavo Avram, he spoke to Sarah, and Abraham came to mourn her Sarah and welcome. This is a remarkable midrash. It's remarkable, just I think historically, what might have been the context for the mothers of children, Jewish children that might have been in danger at that moment. Of course, it's highly plausible at that moment in Jewish history. There were women and parents who were crying for Jewish children who were literally sacrificed. But what's remarkable here is that you'll see in a moment from Aviva Zornberg that the shofar, which is essentially in the Akedah story, right? What happens in the Akedah story? Let's just tell it to me outside before we look at Aviva Zornberg. In the Akedah story, which is the binding of Isaac in chapter 22, where is the shofar appear? Does anybody know? I mean, there's no word.
The ram.
The ram. So the ram is the symbol of not Isaac's death, but rather the thing that saved him. The shofar is the symbol and the physical object of redemption and salvation. It's a good story. The shofar it's a good story, right? Now for the ram, I really don't care. Right, now for the ram. But for Isaac, right, it's a good story. It's like the shofar becomes, and in fact, when Sa'adik Gaon in the 9th century was talking about one of the reasons that we blow the shofar, it's not to remember Sarah's cries. It's to remember that that Abraham was willing to sacrifice his only child. And look, we'll blow the shofar to remind you, God, that we Jews are so dedicated, so committed, right? So you too should also put replacements for us. Like if we were guilty, but for whatever reasons, find a ram for me, right? Find a ram that will replace me. So look at the way that this Midrash completely re-understood.
Replace me or free me?
Free me, replace, like in other words, be in my place instead of me. Right? Find something instead of me. Let me off the hook. Look at what Aviva Zornberg does with this. Essentially, reading this Midrash, the suggestion is that Isaac's death cries, expressing the unsavability of the creature in the grip of overwhelming forces, are echoed mimetically by Sarah. In other words, who is helpless and he was crying Isaac. And the mother, and his mother at that moment is crying mimetically, meaning there's a place of identification between these two characters in the Midrash. Just as Isaac is crying, right? She too is crying and wailing, right? By Sarah, also fast also fast in irremediable anguish, and that these are reenacted in our ritual to redemptive effect, right? Meaning the shofar blasts on the new year are to transform Sarah's death into atonement, because the trua, the broken shofar tone, is groaning and wailing. The more obvious notion that the shofar, the ram's horn, evokes the substitution of the ram for Isaac in the moment of active sacrifice, thus takes on a more tragic and paradoxical cast. Isaac is saved, and the shofar announces the possibility of redemption, of symbolic substitution. But Sarah is not saved. And yet the cries of her and his despair are retained in liturgy and ritual as atonement for her descendants. The groans and the wails of the shofar on Rosh Hashanah express the four dimensions of human life. It would have been better for humans to never have been born. But in the very heart of this burning recognition arises the affirmative flame of the very good of creation. When the angel negates negation, when the angel calls out, "Do not raise your hand against the boy," Isaac is restored to life. But at the same time, his ashes remain on the altar, the total surrender of the burnt offering, leaving no residue of hope, no tissue of illusion, is not neutralized. This core knowledge of paradox, without contraries, there is no progression, is Isaac's radical experience bequeathed to his children. Happy are the people who know the Shua, the note of the shofar, God. They walk in the light of your presence. To know the brokenness, the hollow resonance of the shofar is to sharpen one's hearing for the affirmations of faith. Rosh Hashanah is a day of coronation. Rosh Hashanah is the day, Hayom Haras Olam, the day of the world being born, of redemption's possibility, of the possibility that humanity can perfect itself, that humanity might be saved. It's a day of the birth of hope. And yet we recognize the despair of the hopeless. The Shua is the absolute radical embodiment of the paradox of laughter and wailing all at once. And Rosh Hashanah becomes a day that is both a yontif, it's a day of celebration, a day of joy, a day of, of jubilance. We don't do vidui, we don't do confession, we're not ready to say we're sorry yet, but we're ready to be broken wide open so that we might pray in that place. I think that Rosh Hashanah and Selichot, and the way to begin tonight, is we begin from a place of brokenness. We begin from a place of, even with this great hope that Isaac was born, and we waited so many years for Isaac. There's the recognition on Rosh Hashanah of within the wholeness of creation, there is a deep hidden structure of brokenness that lives there as well. And that this introduction of the wails of Sarimim, of Sarah on Rosh Hashanah, the wails of the mother of Sitra, the two mothers who are crying in the midst of Hashem Melech, it's like, God, kings in the field, it's all awesome, but like, we're wailing. It's unbelievable.
Are you saying that Rosh Hashanah could have both wailing and laughter?
I absolutely sing. And Rav Kook says it better. Look at source 5. There can't be the beginning of Tikkun without pain. And the wails of the shofar, the Shua, which is the essence of the day, is, as Rav Kook said, the pain felt in the initial inspiration to do penitence, which means to do tshuva, to attune the instrument that's out of attunement, is due to the severance of the evil layers of the self, which cannot be mended as long as they are attached to an inherent part of the person and cause deterioration of the whole spirit. Now, Rav Kook here means like through penitence, they are severed from the basic essence of the self, meaning it doesn't mean that you become if you're a therapist or you're thinking, I don't want to separate any part of the self, I want to keep all the self in integrity, but that's not what it means. It means that when we begin to see, because you can't see something that is attached to you and with clarity, right? Until you can witness something, right? You're identified with it. And the space between what you are and what you see is the beginning of pain, right? Because you begin to see, oh, that's me too. I'm causing that pain through the way that I'm behaving or the things that I've done. And in some sense, he says every sin oppresses the heart because it disrupts the unity between the individual person and reality itself. We become, right? We ourselves think that which is, now we see the thing that is separating us. And we're like, oh, that thing, that obstinance, that difficulty, that stubbornness, oh, wait, that's me. And, it's like a mirror, you like walk by it, when you see yourself in the mirror, you see yourself as if someone were watching you, you say, oh, wow, that's what I look like. That's how you see me. I'll tell you, I was sitting with somebody this week. It was a dear friend, a teacher in the Romemu community. And I was trying to get some clarity around an issue that I've been struggling with, connected to this community and some things that have been happening last months. And I started to tell the story, my story, the way that I think about it, my perspective. And I got caught up in telling the story. And at some point, she's brilliant in this way. And those of you who have worked with people who are like this, she stopped me. She said, "Now let me ask you, the way that you're telling the story now." All of a sudden, I stopped. I was like, oh, I was in telling the story, right? And she said, the way that you're telling the story now, is that the way you told it before? And I said, yeah. And then I said there, and she said, okay, I get it now, I get it. And I said there, great, thank you so much. What did it feel like for you? Because I need to feel, because when I tell it, I'm in it, right? Tell me how you're experiencing me right now, because I only experience myself. This is me, right? And she said, thank you for asking. And I'll tell you. And so she gave me like a whole, like, this is the way I experienced you this way. And it was so painful to hear it because it was like, oh, right, I've heard that. Right? It's like, yeah, people have told me that before. And you're like, oh, yeah. Thank you. They hold up a mirror to you. And in that moment, you get that sense of like, oh, that's this, I'm disconnected in that moment, right? Wow, thank you. And that hurts to hear. It's like, when you're playing a note and you're off, but if nobody tells you that you're out of tune, you get used to, oh, that's each line. Okay, whatever you want.
What did you tell Grandma? How did she say, how did she experience it?
Well, Tony, by asking that question, you're putting me on the spot. And I don't think you do that. So I've already exposed enough of myself. And so I would honor you next time to think, wow, he's already just shown himself in a certain way. Maybe push too much. I appreciate that. It was very vulnerable of me to use. I try to use examples from my own life as much as possible, but not in a way that would in some way make myself feel even more exposed than I've already done. That makes sense. Thank you for hearing that. Thank you. So, but yeah, like We all have it, all of us, right?
Right.
David,
Amen.
you, everybody, we're all like that, right? So Rav Kook is talking to a very deep thing, right? It's and it goes to this other place, right? It goes to this place where when you begin to see the ways in which you are broken, or the ways that you break.
Yeah.
Broken and break. You break your heart. It's like, oh, holy macaroni. You say, like, it's like the first step. Like you say, God, I just can't stop this pattern. It's like bring me, God, your mirroring presence. Give me the mirrors that I need to see, or the ears to hear how out of tune my instrument is. Because I'm thinking that I'm like in this great harmonic resonance, and people are going, you're you know? And then your heart breaks, and like it says in Tehillim, this is the experience of King David with the master of Truva. The Karov Hashem l'nishvrei, the Karov Hashem l'chol korav l'chol she'tu be'emes. Because God is close to all those who call out in truth. Now, is there any more truth than the truth of like, I'm trying to fix this and I can't get it?
Man.
Is there a deeper truth than like we come on Rosh Hashanah tonight? We say the Hashem Hatzlaka v'lanu boshes upon. We say to the Shekhinah, the presence that is in every eye. We say we walk around thinking that we're in harmony. But like it's really we're breaking people with our we're out of tune.
Yeah.
And ourselves, our families, or we say it for the world, we say it for our society, and we're embarrassed, meaning we're exposed, or we're embarrassed. We don't even know because it's our left, it's behind us, and we're like, whoa, I didn't know that wasn't covered. That's a little bit weird. I'm like, oh, wow, it's embarrassing. I thought that I had it all together, and I'm so far from that, right? And so this experience of brokenness and despair is the essence of the Rosh Hashanah readings. Not only does the Torah scream to us, not only does the shofar speak to us and say the mother of Sisera, the mother of Isaac, the wailing of the ones who burst and who have lost, and the birth and have lost, and our own brokenness. It's like Hagar in the Torah reading, like Hagar, she's like, okay, what did I do? Like, I'm broken. I want to save my child, but I feel like I can't look at it. I can't look at it. Like, no, I can't. It's so broken. I'm so broken. It's so broken. The situation's broken. God, I'm like, I'm throwing on like, help me, Hashem. And like years ago, when a dear Rabbi Jill said so beautifully on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, that it's specifically that moment that Hagar was at her last moment. She was so broken, and then she lifted her eyes and she saw. Like she lifted her eyes and she saw, and it was something that was there the whole time, but she didn't see it because she was in despair, and then she opened her eyes and she saw it. So this movement of broken and prayer. Right. I just want. I see the hands. I just want to get to our dear friend Rabbi AJ Heschel, and then I promise to open them. On source number 14. Let's look at source 13, and then we go to source 14. So the Zohar, but the Zohar is the 13th century. Heschel was the 20th, but he's drawing from there. It's written, serve God with gladness, come before God with song. No sadness may be shown before God. What if a person feels pain and anguish? He cannot rejoice in his heart and must seek mercy from the supreme King, Queen, Majestic One in the midst of their troubles. Should they desist from praying since they cannot do so without sadness? They cannot make their heart rejoice and enter in gladness and the Gila, Verina. What can a person do, says the Zohar? And then the Zohar says that all the gates of heaven may be closed. but the gate of tears is never closed. Tears are the only are only the result of sadness and anguish. Those who oversee the ways of prayer break down all locks and bars. This is translation. I should have done this translation myself. Like if you secret of prayer is that you can, if you come to a place of sadness, a place of despair, a place of anguish, a place of vulnerability and openness, all those things don't diminish the human like self-esteem, like that, but like the sense of like, specifically because I esteem myself, I know that I can also be deeply human in my limited capacity, in my limited abilities. And then that prayer becomes a source of opening. And that's what Heschel, prayer is not a stratagem for occasional use, right? A refuge to resort to now and then, but rather like an established residence for the innermost selves. All things have a home. The bird has a nest, the fox has a hole, the bee has a hive. It sounds like king, right? You almost like, who knows if Martin Luther, the great doctor, but he certainly would have had, when he had a rhetorical flourish, but this here, Dr. King, is soul without prayer is a soul without a home. Weary, sobbing, the soul after roaming through a world festered with aimlessness, falsehood, and absurdity, seeks a moment in which to gather up its scattered light, in which to divest itself of enforced pretension and camouflage, in which to simplify complexities, in which to call for help without being a coward. Oh, I love it. Call for help without being a coward. Such a home is prayer. Bake to a house of prayer. Prayer is the house in which the soul said, I can settle in and be vulnerable and be at peace in my needing divinity, needing community, needing solemnity, needing all those things. Continuity, permanence, intimacy, authenticity, earnestness are its attributes. For the soul, home is where prayer is. To pray is to overcome distance, to shatter screens, to render obliquities straight. Feel the break between God and the world. Right? All of these things, prayer, a lot of words for prayer. You go on, it's really Aviva Zornberg and all of the things that he said. This is the movement of Rosh Hashanah towards Yom Kippur. The movement of Rosh Hashanah towards Yom Kippur is Rosh Hashanah brings us brokenness and breaking and prayer and sets us up for the ability to ask for forgiveness, to seek forgiveness. To imagine that we are also those who not only are broken, but who break too. Because if we are helpless too, there are others around us who are similarly helpless and who themselves experience maybe the kinds of breakings that we are, in ourselves that we can be privy to. And to be able to walk into the Aseri Meshuvah, the days between Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, is to be able to be broken in some way by the wailing of Sarah and the wailing of Sister's mother and the wailing of the world and the despair that we also experience, but to not be cowards in saying we need help. We need help making amends. We need help seeing our foibles and our blind spots. So I'm gonna stop. I know that there are some thoughts, and I deeply want to get to my friend Erica Brown in the last couple of sources. But first, we'll stop and take a couple of thoughts from the room and then from the Zoom, and then we'll come back. 2 more sources, and then we'll go into our writing exercise. Your hand.
So I was going to say, I think most of us don't even know the way in which we're broken. We don't have someone holding a mirror up to us or saying, you really need to work on whatever. That's rare. Most people, they'll sidestep that. They want to stay your friend, but so I think that we're all sort of living in a false sense of who we are. We don't really see the ways we might be offending people or being insensitive, and nobody telling us. So it's, you know, we have our idea, oh, I gotta fix this and that about me and be better. But I think a lot of the stuff we ourselves are blind to.
I think it's such a good point. Remember, reading, I was reading Rav Soloveitchik, who was writing that one of the reasons why people we don't do a personal redo, a personal confession on Yom Kippur, is because if we did a personal confession, a lot of us would be like, look how evolved I am. Like, look at me, I'm Sandra D, look at me, I'm confessing, I'm so evolved that I'm a leader, like especially leaders, like, oh, look at me, I can give my apology in public, and that public, confessional is become all de rigueur at this point, and you kind of check off your box and you can pat yourself on the back with your gesture, and Rav Soloveitchik said, no, we do it in private, we say to God, which is the best way to confess, is you say to God, no matter what I say in public, you know the truth. You know my truth. You know if I'm preening and I'm, gesturing all my, my virtue signaling, and I know that that's also getting in the way of my own evolution, my own health. And so I deeply pray from the deepest place in my heart, God, let me not be in my BS. Like, bring me a mirror that will show me who I really am, so that because I really, really want to know. And what Salvation said is, the thing you can't do is, it would take a lot of omens, a lot of courage to ask someone to be your spiritual partner, to really tell you the truth. And you're right, it's very hard because people don't want to lose you as a friend. And so often it's our own fault because we don't want to give their feedback. And so people stop giving it to us. And then we say, if they're not giving us feedback, it must be that they don't need it, and so on. And so Salvation was saying, like, to be able to deepen in our desire to hear good feedback is what we can do. Because more often than not, as you said, we should assume that most people are not telling us the truth about ourselves because they love us and they think they're loving us, and also because they don't want us to walk away. So one of the things we can do is we can become vessels that can hear feedback. And there's also a way to give feedback, and that's also true. And most people don't know how to give it either, and so that's very complicated. And you're right. If you're lucky, you do have that's why a partner, Isaac Connecto, is somebody that, in the biblical understanding of partnership, is that it's not just helping you, but also opposing you in a way that gives you some of that sand in the pearls formation, right? Like you need some irritants, reality check, like where you come up, right? So tshuva is absolutely clear that not the case for everybody. Some people, I would say, do have a very high, I don't know how it works this way, but some people do have a higher coachability factor and attract people and give them the truth. And I hear your point, and I think that if Rosh Hashanah would be successful, at least on that level for most of us, if we walked into Rosh Hashanah and said, I can pretty much assume that there are things about myself that I do not know. There are blind spots I don't know, because that's what it is. And I'm at least praying that I do whatever it takes to be able to find those mirrors, and that God give me the strength to not push mirrors away. Mirror on the wall, only tell me what I want to hear. I think that's a deep tefillah. I think that's a deep, deep prayer. Like, I want to get to Rabbi Girona of Girona, rather, of Rabbi Yonah, and maybe you'll see some of that in there. But that's such an honest thing to say. I really appreciate that. So, Clever, I know that we have a lot of voices, and I also have an exercise I want us to do. And even though this is generally like study time, usually an open book, but it's a little bit less of that kind of routine quality. But feel free to, like, I'm just a couple more voices, and then also in the Zoom of God as well. So I'll take a couple more voices, and I will go from Theo, Tony, to Jonathan. Yeah.
My question has to do with this week before Rosh Hashanah, and the week between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You were talking about being broken what do you think we as individuals should focus on this week to prepare ourselves for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
So, good question. I think that I don't know how each person will do it individually. I'll say for myself that I think that for me, what I'll be asking myself every day is, in what ways, in what ways might I wake up to hear what people, and ask people for feedback on how I'm showing up in my life and with them. And then also I'm asking myself to be in dialogue with both my past self and my future self. To see both what my past self was afraid to know and what my future self is afraid to receive. I'm asking myself, to give myself, to really be honest, if I have a week to get my business in order, what would I do? I think that there are no blessings that came out of the pandemic. But the blessing that came out of the pandemic for me was an awareness that in one day you can let go of all the things that really don't matter if what matters most is on the line. And I haven't felt, it's hard to bring that with you. I think that every year we try to do that, and it's hard to bring that with us. And we fall back into old patterns. But I think God in his mercy gives us a chance to repeat our patterns as often as possible until we get it. And so maybe this is the year that the dream of breaking your pattern will happen.
Man, I like it.
I think, I can say with absolute certainty that I'll just say for myself that I had a very, very big pattern that was what Tony working on, and I made the right choice.
Oh, man.
And it was a 7-year cycle for me. And things often happen, I think it's 7-year cycle, 7, 14, whatever. As those who know. And I think that we do get a chance to fix it. And if it comes around again, 7 years, but for 2 years, 3 years, whatever the cycle be for you, but I think that we can make different choices. So I think those are the questions that I'll be sitting with, and you can come up with their own that are unique to your life. Tony, go ahead, brother.
I'm just thinking about when those two pockets and a balance to be struck between
Boonin?
Rebbe Bloom
Boonin, yeah, okay.
and the two pockets, which many of us know, but you want to repeat it or should I?
I'll repeat it, but just what do you think?
I'm thinking there's some real balance to be struck between profound humility to the extreme and also profound honoring of oneself at the same time.
Yeah.
And also not only not learning less and less, learning more and more to buy into one's own bullshit less and less, BS less and less, but also to buy into people around you. Some family and friends also provide a lot of BS that is actually ends up really being kind of an Uncle Scar-ish kind of view, to borrow a Lion King metaphor, where Uncle Scar is the Uncle Scar within, and the Uncle Scars within and without are going to tell you, you should feel ashamed of yourself. You should run and hide. And that's also, and if we succumb to that voice or those voices, And that's another way we protect ourselves from the lessons of the Quran.
You know, I'm blessed, I can say I'm blessed. And those who know, I'm blessed to be in a community where we can talk about very deep matters with great nuance and not be in some kind of like very superficial, kind of populist notion of how tshuva happens. And so Tony's bringing a very deep piece of tshuva, which is extremely precise. And each soul has its own path in tshuva. And the balancing between chesed and gevurah, between loving kindness and let's say criticism or healthy criticism or boundaries or whatever we want to use is a very individual and quality, and that the mirrors that we're with have to also know how to balance, the intensity of the reflection with also our capacity to see it, and also giving us a clear mirror. A distorted mirror, right, is Uncle Star is a distorted mirror. And we carry some of those things with us too. And I don't think that there's no contradiction between healthy shame and holy shame. And there is a distinction between holy shame and toxic shame. And toxic shame cuts so deeply that tshuva is not possible because one shuts down. The healthy instinct in us is to be preservational. And if someone shames who you are in the deepest place, you won't be able to hear the actual ways that you need to hear, where you've broken your agreements and where you can rise even higher. And that's a very dangerous cycle. And it actually preys on our sense that we are worse than our humanity, rather than who we are in our deep humanity. When we're seen for who we are, both for our foibles and our faults, and also our fantastic angelic qualities, then we can both stand before God and say, you made me, you made us. We are an expression of you, our holy Shema. And like any child, we make mistakes and need guidance. And like any child, we also want you to celebrate in seeing us here today and dancing. And we should be able to hold both of those things, the joy of our beauty and our power, and also how we misuse our power for all kinds of ways that are just frankly honest. And we'll get to that in a second. So I thank you for that, Tony. Last comment, Jonathan, and then maybe somebody in the Zoom room.
Started in the talk. Definitely, we're learning how to explore emotions with people in the hospital and also working record. And I was thinking about how when we break the narrative, somebody speaking to us, it's sort of ask, where are you feeling this in the body? Or I'm wondering if right, if you're feeling X now, or like there needs to be some sort of mirroring by someone that is not necessarily close to you, but somebody that can actually be there for you, with you, that doesn't want to say only your strength, but actually sort of you your weakness. And I think that doing that break of the narrative that we go into is actually not allowing us to be, it allows us to open up, right? It's just thinking about this break and
Beautiful. I think that's true. I think that sometimes sometimes someone who has nothing to lose, but only wants to give us a gift, or because we've done it, and they say, you know what, I don't have a relationship with you, so let me just tell you the truth, right? And that becomes also a great gift in our expanding our sense of how we show up in the world in ways that we can't know until we do it. And when that happens, of course, it can hurt us deeply. If anybody wants to see a real tshuva in modern, like a modern idiom, it's watch The Bear. Watch the TV show The Bear. Because characters there are so full of flaws and beauty all at once. So wounded and so hurt and wounding and hurting. And so worthy of compassion and love, but also worthy of being told the truth about how they're showing up in the world in ways that are pathological and unhealthy. And you feel all of it. It's the full gamut of human existence, like this family so broken, and this talented youngest kid who is he's the Mashiach figure, because like King David was the youngest, right? And he was the one that always the hero, like Luke, he's the hero because he holds the family's pain in him. He's trying to transmute it, and he's just spilling it everywhere. But then he has enough of this courage to know when he just broke something, and he's getting closer and closer to not breaking it so quickly. Like it's the whole show. If you map it out, it's like it's like a spiral dance of intense. Like as it gets stronger, the pain also begins to emerge, as we know in therapeutic context. Like the stronger a human becomes, the more able they are to like bring the real things, right? Like the beginning of healing is like, oh, just at the surface. But as the relationship builds and as things stabilize, then the real things begin to come. Because then the self says, oh, it's safe here. Okay, I'll show you the real thing. Right? And so this show is just like unbelievable how beautiful it is in depicting like a healing journey taking place between just a bunch of regular people like all of us who are full of light and shadow, goodness and also selfishness, brilliance, and also the ability to harm one another is just intense. It's even painful to watch the various episodes, like the things they're saying to each other. And yet throughout it, there is this broken and then this crying and then this praying. And you feel the prayer. The whole show is a big prayer book in a way. But how they're learning to pray, like to say the truth in a way that can be heard. From a place of despair and also hopeful, not giving into despair. It's really remarkable. So I want to talk. There's no hands up in the Zoom guide, so I want to bring my friend and teacher Erica Brown's teaching. Another tikkun also, if people don't know this, like balancing some of the voices in our tradition with women's voices, and I didn't think of that ahead of time, but then afterwards I saw somebody said something as I put these things like you have to balance, but like Aviva Zornberg I put Aviva Zornberg on every sheet because I have to. Because she's Aviva Zornberg. Oh my gosh, And it's the same thing with Erica Brown. But it's a tikkun for balancing out the voices of in our tradition. So this is from Erica Brown's book on the Chagim, and I wanted to use this to bring us into our writing exercise for tonight.
This is number 16.
Number 16. Rabbi Jonah of Gerona, Rabbeinu Yonah as he was called repentance, tshuva, a sanctuary, a place to escape the intensity of sin. It's also the place to embrace the strength needed to fight our hardest inner battles and our stubborn resistance to change. By calling repentance a sanctuary, Rabbeinu Yonah in Sharei Tshuva, the gates of repentance, transformed an act into a space that we can step into and know that we are home, right? And we are safe. Right, she's drawing on Heschel. You see that? And now Erica drew from Heschel. We have returned to our essential selves, the people we like best. We are at one with forces that usually rage within us, pulling us between good and evil, generosity and self-absorption, selflessness and narcissism. To be effective, tshuva must move us all the way from regret to a place of profound change. The change must make us so distant from where we once were that we are actually able to instruct and guide others to avoid what was once a major source of personal temptation or spiritual weakness in ourselves. It's as if we were to look at an old photograph of ourselves and we recognize the image and the likeness, but also know that we are not the same person anymore. Rabbeinu Yonah presents the anatomy of an apology as an outline for transformation in his table of contents, offering 20 steps that contribute to the process of true change. 12 steps. It's like 12 steps. I see your 12 steps, and I'll make it 20. So look into these 20 steps of tshuva, of like this aspect of tshuva. One experiences regret. one relinquishes the sin or the act that is, right, that one regrets. One expresses sorrow. One suffers. One worries. One embodies the shame, healthy shame, Tony, engages in self-abasement, embraces humility in deed, conquers physical desire, improves deeds in relation to the sin itself, searches one's ways, recognizes the magnitude of sin, understands the severity of lesser sins, confesses, prays, corrects the misdeed, right? The whole long list. Pursues acts of loving kindness and truth, becomes aware of the constant presence, though, of that temptation, forsakes the sin when temptation then calls again, which is for the Rambam called Tshuva Gemura, complete and total Tshuva. You come back to where you started and you do it differently. And then one teaches others and helps them avoid a similar path. The list presents both the range of emotions that it takes to enter the sanctuary of repentance and the behavior that must emerge from these emotions. Sin, even if of a minor ilk, must become magnified in our eyes so that we understand its cost and its consequences. The movement from sadness to sorrow to shame must be experienced, and that is only possible if we sit with our sin. Sit with our mistakes, our missing of the mark, our efforts, and their consequences, analyzing their full impact instead of briefly visiting them and then quickly squirreling them away. Now, lest you think that this was something that, Romemu Yonah was like telling us because like, oh, I'm this holy rabbi, right? The story of Romemu Yonah, he told his book was the final stage. In other words, him writing the book was the final stage that he just enumerated, the 20th stage where you've done it yourself and now you try to teach others to avoid it, because he himself, his biography, is a story of somebody who completely missed the mark and did something horrible in public. Romemu Yonah of Gerona, one of the greatest rabbis of that era, he knew the process of tshuva intimately because he himself needed it. He instigated a book burning in 1233 of Maimonides' most controversial book, The Guide of the Perplexed in France. The Aristotelian overtones of the book felt foreign to many rabbis, and they worried about the impact this would have on the faith of their flock when 24 cartloads of handwritten volumes of the Talmud were then put on trial in 1240 and then burned publicly in Paris 2 years later, meaning a full 9 years after what he had instigated took place. In other words, 9 years after he had been the reason why they burned Maimonides' books, 24 cartloads of the Talmud were then burned in Paris in 1242. Right? And so he took it in and he said, oh my gosh, this started with me. And he thought it was his fault. He said, oh my God, I have a hand in it. He regretted his involvement in the initial book burning, and he was unable to forgive himself for condemning such a great Jewish scholar. He felt that he had shamed Maimonides in public, perhaps believing that this paved the way for the future, right, book burnings and anti-Semitic acts. And as a penance, legend has it that Romemu Yonah cited Maimonides in every one of his teachings and planned to enact an ancient Jewish custom. He intended to go to Maimonides' grave in Tiberia and bring a quorum to beg Maimonides for forgiveness.
Wow.
He had already publicly acknowledged the error of his ways in his synagogue. He could not write about tshuva without practicing it. He could not describe and chastise the willful ignorance of those who did not improve themselves when he himself was not living that out. He felt guilty. He would be guilty of betrayal. So he set off on his trip, was detained along the way, and died of a rare illness in 1263, never, right, having made his way. Some say that his illness was a punishment for what had happened. He knew he had to make amends, and yet Rabbi Yonah never carried out the ritual to externalize his apology in the presence of the offended and the community. Like so many of us, he knew what he had to do to right his error, but he only embarked on the journey but didn't finish it. He did not complete it. There are many activities we do this season to externalize sins so that we can be emboldened enough to conquer it. In the ancient days of the Bible, Yom Kippur was a time when 2 goats were designated by lottery to bear the sins of the people. One was to be sacrificed to achieve expiation and so on. Right? I didn't finish the full thing, but essentially, Dr. Brown essentially says, Erica says, that we do a lot of these things that Rabbeinu Yonah began. We externalize, like we start the journey towards Tshuva, but we don't finish it. So, my friends, I would like us to go through this process, in the next half hour together. Last year, and every year for the last I think it's now our 10th year, we write a letter to ourselves to be read next year. And in that letter, we write a letter to the future self that we will be. And we say to that person, whatever we need to speak to them about. And then Romemu usually, this year, I don't know if people received it, but we then mail the letters to you. And I don't know about you, but it's always a very powerful thing to hear from my past self about what I needed to learn this year, or what I thought, we were going to work on. I'd like to do a different exercise this year. I'd like for us to take the journey inwardly toward the breaking, the crying, the praying, and then the fixing. There are mistakes that all of us are carrying with us that we want others to apologize for. And there are mistakes that we ourselves know that we should apologize for. Like we just know. I'd like for you to take that journey in the next half hour of writing a letter. Could be to a number of people. It could be a combination of what you wish would be said to you to make amends. It could be what you need to say to make amends. A letter that is a fixing letter. A letter that comes with the full experience of, as much as you can handle, of some consequences of behaviors and thoughts and actions from others and from yourself. And really sit with it for a half hour, like being able to sit with it. And if things come and say, well, I don't do this, this is not my thing, apologies or not, I don't think that's what it's all about. Whatever it is, okay, maybe that'll be part of your journey. Maybe you'll write something else, and everybody's free to write whatever they'd like. This is just my suggestion. Take it for what it's worth. But to really listen to both the broken shofar inside of us and the sense of wherever that takes you, and then a letter, right, towards someone and a letter towards you. On both sides, you can ask for more paper. These letters will be mailed next year. But here I really want to invite something that came up this morning for me very strongly in our Torah study with Rabbi Koras. If you can, and if it feels true to you, or close to true, make a commitment in the letter. Make it what? A commitment to action of some kind. Like I will. And even if there's a party that's thinking, I don't know if I will. Just see how it feels to write it out and sit with it, write it and breathe into it. Say oh, I don't know, maybe. But bring from the place of intention into the place of expression, if you can. My suggestion for practice tonight. We have pens, we have paper. You'll feel free. We're going to be joining one another to start our prayers Selichot at 11:15 or so. Closer to 12 o'clock, the better in some ways. But we're gonna start playing music at around 11:20. You have the whole building. Go right in. Find a space. Put on your headphones. Make a phone call. Stay right here. Let's do it in the mode of prayer. If you are at home, friends, find a space privately. If you'd like us to mail it to you, I'm not sure exactly how to do that. If you write it at home and then send it to us, we promise to then send it back to you. Or put it somewhere and promise to look at it in a year from now. But for the next half hour or so, we're going to be in this practice together. Does that make sense online too? And again, it's a suggestion. like other things, it's just still for me, it's just upaya. It's just kilo eitzatova, good. I'm gonna try it out, see how it feels. We're not gonna come back and convene for Danny and for those of you online. We're gonna meet you in the prayer space upstairs, for Selichot. And so we just want to bless you all, wherever you are, that the teachings tonight landed in some way that might be of some service to your neshama on your own path. And may the prayer season that we're in right now be a house that holds your soul, a sanctuary for your soul's vulnerability, its hopefulness without cowardice, a place where the birds and the butterflies are aware of the spaciousness that the soul needs in to be broken open and to ask for help and to make commitments and to rekindle that sense that we can break old patterns and begin new ones. So Hashem should bless all of us as with that. And let's say Amen. So
Nice.
happy writing. Don't waste any time getting to it because we're gonna start at 11:20. So like a shot.
I didn't. Where we are and what do we hear. That's my answer.
Thanking everyone. Oh, yeah, well, we could be apologizing to someone. Feel something if someone. I mean, if you've done that, you can try to heal life. Trying to heal. Could be that your letter could be that you're going to reach out to someone.
Would you want to do
If
that?
you can.
I have a feeling.
He said a lot of different. Part of it. Make up or someone
I think
reverse atone for the things that you really did.
But I think his point is, how do you break yourself? How do you break that sleep? Whatever that means for you.
That's
Well,
very,
you can do break open to mind, break open
It looks good.
little screwdriver over there or no? Teeny screwdriver. No, it's like the screws to the battery area. I lost one screw and the other one got loosened. That's true.